Real stories, raw truth. This is Whiskey and War Stories.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Whiskey and War Stories. Here we go. And welcome to Whiskey and War Stories, a podcast where we sit down with those who live through the unspoken battles on the front lines, behind the badge, and deep within themselves. This is where raw truth meets quiet resilience, and where every story is poured straight. No chaser. Whether it's combat trauma, the weight of the job, scars that don't show up on paper, or the strength that doesn't make headlines, we're here to talk about it. No filters, no fluff, just real people, real pain, and the strength it takes to keep going. So, pour yourself something, settle in, and let's get it going. And if you believe these stories matter, keep the conversation going. Like, follow, and subscribe. We're on Instagram, Spotify, YouTube, and Amazon Music. Your support helps us reach the people who need it the most. Ryan.
Hi, man. How's it going, man?
What's up, brother? Welcome to Season 3, Episode 6. How are you?
I'm good. Had a eventful day at work, and then I realized that I'm helping co-host a show called Whiskey and War Stories. So well-timed. I can't wait to dive into this, which we will in a little bit, but happy to be here.
Awesome, man. Also happy to be here, and I love the pace we're going. As usual, we have another really good guest and a really powerful guest this time, so I think everybody's kind of in for a treat. But before we introduce the guest, as usual, each episode is dedicated to a fallen hero, and this episode, Ryan has the honors of doing the dedication, right?
All right. So unfortunately, this involves two officers that were killed in the state of Tennessee. Sergeant Lee Sorensen and Officer Eric Estrada were shot and killed responding to multiple 911 hang-up calls at a home in Trenton, Utah. I'm sorry if I said Tennessee. While one officer was speaking with a resident about a domestic dispute, a man emerged with a gun and opened fire, fatally wounding him. The second officer arrived as backup and was also shot and killed. A Box Elder County deputy and his canine partner were struck but survived with non-life-threatening injuries. Bystanders were ultimately able to persuade the gunman to surrender, and he was arrested for murder charges. Sergeant Sorensen served 16 years with the Trenton Garland Police Department and is survived by his wife and 3 children. Officer Eric Estrada had been with the department for less than 1 year and is survived by his wife and 2 children. So here's let's raise a glass to these fallen heroes.
Cheers. Rest in peace, brothers.
Rest in peace.
You know, when I hear those sometimes, I don't know if tragedy has a gauge, but you know, I look at it like there's two sides of the coin. Like, it's tragic that you had a veteran police officer, 16 years, that more than almost two-thirds of the way done with his career, right? If you assume he's working 30 years, but he's over the hump. You know, he's on the downhill as far as retirement goes, close to at least. And 16 years and he gets killed. And the flip side is you have a year cop that, probably just got off of probation, got off training 6 months ago, and then, tragically gets killed and doesn't even have an opportunity to experience anything in his career and, do special assignments and those type of things. So I think both in its own special way is kind of unique and tragedy,
Yeah, horrible. Those bullets don't discriminate, man. They're blind, and it's not on marksmanship from the bad guy. It's call it fate, call it tragedy, both. But those 2 bullets found a path and hit these 2 heroes.
Yeah, tragic. Yeah, rest in peace, brothers.
Yeah, rest in peace.
Ryan, you got bottle. What are we drinking today?
You guys had this bottle on, I think, last year, but you turned me onto it. It's called Brothers Bond. This is the rye edition. It's actually made by a couple of actors that come out on Vampire Diaries. I'm sure you watch it all the time, Jaime.
Actually,
I
I've
got
never
all
seen an
the.
episode.
I've never even heard of it.
No.
But this is a 95 proof rye, and some of the tasting notes are rich caramel cream, sweet, intense candied raisin, delicate rose petals and mint, and a hint of aromatic grapes. So let's see what this tastes like.
I don't know if you taste the mint in there.
It tastes like whiskey.
It
tastes like the rye both hug me and slap me at the same time. That's what it tastes like.
That sounds like a good whiskey.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good, but I wouldn't go as far as delicate rose petals, but
or mint.
It's a good whiskey.
You taste some mint in there.
Quite possibly some oak, but that's a stretch. But it tastes like whiskey. It's very good.
Nice, I like it.
Yeah.
All right.
You got a guess for us?
Yeah. Cheers to brothers first.
All right. Here's to
making a good whiskey.
Very good.
Yeah. So on to our special guest. So this guest unique because he's actually a LPCC, a licensed therapist. And I love it when we ask our guests to always send us a bio, and sometimes the bios they range. Some are pretty extensive, and some aren't. And I noticed that Jason's bio is very brief, but it's not because of the stuff he hasn't done. I think it just, from my conversation with him, it kind of just shows the type of character he is. Very quiet, professional, and I'm sure that. There's much more behind him than just this brief bio. But our special guest this week is Jason Astorga. He's a licensed therapist, LPCC, who brings a unique perspective shaped by his journey as a Filipino immigrant, first-generation college graduate, and U.S. Navy submarine mechanic veteran. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jason.
What's
Jason,
up, y'all?
brother?
Hey, Jason.
How
are you?
How are you?
Good, man. Are you able to hear me when you're backstage? Can you hear our conversation?
I can, yeah. Rest in peace to those two brothers for sure, and thoughts and prayers to the folks that they left behind.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was just, you overheard, but I was telling Ryan that a lot of times we get the bios and they're pretty extensive. A lot of our guests are very well qualified, and a lot of times there are times that we get really brief bios, and I always think it's, the person's probably really humble and doesn't like to bang their own drums and doesn't like to talk about themselves. But someone like yourself's LPCC, college graduate, a vet, and is out there helping people. I know there's just a lot more to the 5 sentences, that I read. So thanks for coming on Whiskey and War Stories. And I look forward to, the next hour and 15 having a chat with you.
Having me, man. And I love the tradition, by the way. A new whiskey every episode. That's awesome.
Yes. Yeah. We love that. We're hoping that it catches on and somebody says, hey, we like these guys and maybe we'll sponsor them. So,
it's a good twist.
Yeah.
Consistency.
Yeah. So very excited, Jason. Like I said, we've had a therapist on once before, but never LPCC. And for those that don't know, it's a licensed practitioner, clinical counselor. Did I get that right?
Licensed professional clinical counselor.
Okay, yeah, enough. So before we dive into the work that you do today, I kind of want to start with you. An immigrant from the Philippines, served as a Navy submariner and a first-generation college graduate. Pretty powerful arc. Can you kind of tell us about your little bit of background? How old were you when you came here? Just tell us a little about yourself.
For sure, yeah. That's actually funny because I've gotten that a lot through grad school, that I don't speak enough about myself, not keeping it humble, but maybe too humble. But
sure.
Yeah, I immigrated when I was 8, and so we as an 8-year-old from the Philippines, all I imagined was snow and the Statue of Liberty. Then we touched down. We touched down in Oakland, California, and none of those two existed.
Dry.
Dry, cold at the time, but yeah. And then so we moved around a lot. We started as a lower middle class, and then my father started struggling with gambling, so we started moving around a lot due to financial struggles. And I like highlighting these things about myself because it's shaped me to be who I am as a clinician, as a person. Um, Being a first gen college student, right? You have to navigate all the systems, all like FAFSA, the application process, all by yourself. You have to figure it out.
Correct.
And so I enlisted into the Navy right after high school. And at first I wanted to be a firefighter. Like that was my dream job as a kid.
Mhm.
And my recruiter, he did a really good job with selling me as being a firefighter on a submarine, which was true, but it was 10% of our job. So,
Oh, wow.
anyways, I got out when I was 22 and went straight into community college. And there, I still wanted to be in the same comfortable system, right? Like, so I wanted to be a cop or a firefighter.
Sure.
And long story short, things change. And so I transitioned to um, majoring in psychology, went into grad school at San Diego State, did my undergrad and grad school at San Diego State, and now I'm a licensed therapist. And I've served veterans and the general population, of course, better term that we call it, right, as vets and
Correct.
civilians. And it's been a journey, and I've loved it. I've developed such a passion for this work, and yeah, that's kind of the broader intro of who I am.
Now, why did your family come here from the Philippines?
Opportunity. My great grandfather was here, and of course, right, the conversion of U.S. dollars to pesos um, is wide. So
Yeah.
for us, it was opportunity just to get a better life, get a better income, and that's what we did.
And do you speak Tagalog?
I don't, but I understand fully.
My
Uh,
my
I,
neighbors are from the Philippines, and I never go hungry, man. It's best food, best neighbors to
Ah,
have.
there we go.
Oh yeah,
Always a
yeah,
feast.
for
yeah.
sure.
I was just gonna tell them. Actually, my best friend, when I was in the Marine Corps, he was a corpsman, a Navy corpsman, attached to our Marine Corps unit, and we were best friends in the Marine Corps, and for several years when we got out. And he was Filipino, and I used to go spend weekends with his family in Vallejo, and just remember all like the food that they had and how amazing it was. Um, yeah, so it's a great culture. So Jason, when you came here, how was it for you emotionally coming from two separate parts of the world? Like, was it an easy transition for you to come here? And I know that you were young, but as you progressed in your preteens and teens, did you find it was an easy transition? You were comfortable here, or were you met with with challenges coming here as an immigrant?
It was it was a culture shock, um, especially going into Oakland, California. Right, it's mostly African Americans, and looking around, I was the only Asian kid at the time, and another Hispanic person with me, and so
Right.
I didn't speak English, and it was hard. It was not only was the language difference, but um, not having that kind of support system to kind of guide me through. Because your parents are busy, right? They're trying to
Sure.
make money, and at the time there were 4 families under one roof because we were also new here and we're still establishing grounds. So house is crowded, and the language barrier that I had at school, it was tough, and emotionally it was difficult. I didn't know how much it impacted me at the time until I did my own work in therapy. But um, And then the moving school to schools and having to navigate new friendships all the time,
Right.
it made me be a shapeshifter, right? I used it as a skill to gain friendships, but also grieving a lot of friendships because of all the transitions that I made. And at the
Right.
time, we still keep in touch with media. So it's a lot of goodbyes and a lot of new beginnings as well in terms of friendships, which was hard. Um, but yeah, I would say it was difficult.
And you were in the Navy, so you served. Did a stint in the Navy. What made you decide to join the military, coming from the Philippines?
So in high school, I did not pay attention. I was just about going outside, playing video games, and I always told myself college isn't for me. And my brother at the time looked at me and he said, "What are you doing? Like, what are you gonna do?" And he
Right.
just dragged me to the recruiter station and he's like, "All right, let's talk to some of them. Take the ASVAB," and I got a pretty high score. And my brother was at the army at the time. My other brother, my oldest brother.
Okay.
And I consulted with him, and he's like, "Go join the Navy. Don't join the Army, the Marines. Just join the Navy. Go travel, see other countries." And so that's what I did. I had no other plan. There was no plan B. I didn't want to work the typical, like, out of high school job, like fast
Sure.
food,
Mm.
uh, things like that. So yeah.
Well, and you said that you wanted to be a firefighter, or at one point, law enforcement. Where was the shift from, being a firefighter or police officer into therapy? How did that? Where did the change come in?
That's such a big and important transition, honestly. My girlfriend, now my wife, my girlfriend at the time, she sat me down. She was like, "What do you want to do? Like, do you really want to follow our parents' footsteps in having a labor-intensive job?
Right.
Because I have opportunities, right? Like, I have the GI Bill available."
Mhm.
And she just really had me reflect on what I'd like to do. And I look back at it, and when we were younger, there was a big group of cousins that we were really tight, probably 8 or 9 of us,
Right.
and we used to have cousin circles, what we called it, and there we just vented and called each other out on like what we're doing wrong, how we can improve, and I always found myself like kind of facilitating the conversation, and I always found people venting to me growing up, and so I looked into that more, and I like connecting with people. And therapy wasn't on my mind at all. Like
Right.
I was a typical sailor, right? I never went to medical and complained about my mental health or my physical ailment. Toughed it out, and so I looked into college advising and went into finally decided to go full steam on college advising. So I had to get my bachelor's and my master's.
Okay.
During undergrad, I majored in psychology and I minored in counseling and social change. And from there, I've always been a big advocacy person. So I always wanted to learn like the lingo the skills that you use, right? And
Right.
it was never about therapy still. Onto grad school, I still wanted to do college advising, but I was advised to go into this program because it was really tight with community colleges, and that's where I wanted to go back to because that's where I started from. I wanted to serve community college students as a college advisor. And so the first year of grad school, I was flushing everything out that pertained therapy. Any skills, any interventions, any language that was in the realm of therapy, I just flushed it out. I'm like, I want to be a college advisor. Let me get to that part of the program. And it wasn't until the second year of grad school where I felt, so we switched supervisors and where I felt like the impact of therapy. That's when I really started peeling the layers of the onion, right? You start to really reflect on your tendency to have it all together and to
Right.
always say you're good. Um, and I just felt a big relief. just a big sigh of relief from better understanding like the impact of immigrating here and jumping friendships to friendships and going to the military and experiencing things there. Post-transition military, right? Navigating through the struggles of that.
Right.
And from there, something clicked with me. I wanted this for other people. And that's when the shift happened. I went into full grind into learning about therapy. So I had to look back into old materials because I'm like flushing out all the things out.
Right.
Here we are.
Wow. I like that. So how did your time in the military shape your understanding of mental health, especially in an environment where, being a veteran myself, sometimes the environment in the military isn't conducive to being vulnerable. So how did that kind of shape your understanding of mental health?
I think that was one of the blocks for me to understand what mental health was. And that's why I was so gun-ho about college advising and didn't even think about doing therapy.
Right.
Because I still had that understanding that we don't talk about our emotions.
Right.
Because we went under and you could talk about your mental health, but it's so easy to get sub disqual, which is what they don't want because it takes years to train us, right? The turnover rate is so high, so they want to keep people there. But I think just bonding with my brothers while we were underwater and really sharing how much we're struggling with one another, not with higher ups, right? That was like a peak of what vulnerability was for me. It was just being true to how depressed we were, going weeks at a time, right? Not seeing the sunlight. There's no windows on board sub, so you're just fluorescent lights everywhere, machine. And there were good times, of course, but I think that's how it influenced my view on mental health.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you said that because, that reminds me also of, being on deployment overseas. And, when you are deployed, or in your particular case, when you're on a submarine underwater for, X amount of time, you begin to appreciate the things in life that like so many of us take for granted. I've laughed and said this, I think, on previous episodes, and someone like yourself would understand it. But I'm like, when you're on deployment, you take things like ship paper for granted, because you may not always have that. You get a little piece in the MRE, and you got to figure out how to clean yourself with something this big. And you take little things for granted like that. And honestly, it's those things that build perspective, and it's those things that has helped me in my career now. Because quite frequently, well, I don't want to say frequently, but there's times where people will complain about stuff, right? I got to work overtime, or we got to do this, or we got to do that. And I always think to myself, I've had so much worse. Staying over late isn't that bad, or maybe I couldn't do this, I couldn't work this overtime day, or whatever the case is. So it's really helped me to shape my perspective on life, and always tell myself, things really aren't that bad. You know what I mean? And it really helped shape me. So it was interesting when you kind of said that there was times that was certainly depressing, being in a sub, and I've never been in one, but I can only imagine, being underwater for a certain amount of time, and that it could be daunting for sure.
That was you talk about living on a ship, or a submarine. The anxiety, man. I mentioned in the early episode. I read a book about the USS Indianapolis. 1945, it was sunk, and everybody half of the ship went in the water, and they were in the water for 4 days, and half of those people got mauled by sharks, reef sharks. I can imagine the anxiety of, like, do you think about that when you're in a submarine? Is that always in your head, like we could implode, or that'd be on my mind like every second?
That's hilarious, because every time we go under, we walk around with our flashlights checking for leaks. But But it's
I
like
would too.
once you're deep enough, right? Like the pressure, it's so big. If you find a leak, you're probably gone.
It's yes,
Um, but
That's
anxiety,
reassuring.
yeah.
right, right. And it's crazy because once you get deep enough underwater, you hear the hull, so the shell of the sub cave in. So it's like popping. And we're like, holy crap. And one time, our captain couldn't get out of his stateroom because the whole ship was just compacted. And he ordered us to go up a few hundred feet just so he can get out of his stateroom. But yeah, anxiety. You're anxiety driven, right? I think that's what they teach you in boot camp straight off the bat. Like, always be on your toes, be perfect, and it's your shipmate's life on the line. It's the boat's life, right? Not just yours. So always aim for perfection, which we make mistakes as humans. So we learn by trial and error.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so you've walked through a lot of transitions in your life, from being an immigrant to um, joining the military to academia, going to school, and now counseling. What part of your journey did you feel the most defeated, and how did you find your footing? How did you get back on track?
I think when I started opening Pandora's box. It was in grad school where it luckily they mandated us to go to therapy, so we had like a support outside of grad school
Mm.
because our program was really unique. We sat in a circle and we challenged each other's perspective, right? And we heard each other's perspective to really allow you to be a multicultural counselor. So the way I approach therapy now is like I look at the person and their whole being rather than just what they're presenting to me. But yeah, opening Pandora's box and really leaning into my emotions and seeing the impact of all the things I went through. I went into like a depressed mode where it was overwhelming. It was during COVID,
Yeah.
we were all virtual, and I started to feel so alienated from like my group of friends because I
Yeah.
was thinking so differently, right? Like I started seeing their tendencies and how that impacts like the group dynamics. So my mind was like on overdrive. And so along with like my traits as a veteran, right? Like I used to always be pissed when people would be late. Um, things like that, right? Like
Yeah.
I used to always eat so fast and people would look at me and be like, bro, you can slow down. But when it's chow, right? Like you gotta relieve the watch, and so you're rushing through your meal. But things like that I started to learn more about. Um, my therapist at the time helped me through, but I think it wasn't the right fit. So I was struggling not just in grad school, but like outside.
Right.
Um, and how did I manage through? I had to switch therapists. I found a new one that really spoke my language. She had a very good understanding of the veteran population. I didn't have to translate anything. Even though she wasn't a vet, she
Right.
just did her work in trying to understand us and knowing our lingos and the hierarchy and the power system. Um, yeah, I think that was the most difficult time in all those transitions.
In preparation for bringing you on the podcast, I was snooping through all your shit, your Instagram and your and your website, which is Astorga Counseling. Um,
Mm.
there's a logo there, and it's astorgacounseling.com. Um, and one of the things that you just said right now, I saw on your webpage. I don't remember the exact wording, but you talked about how you switched therapists, and basically one, was a better fit for you. And you actually addressed that in
Mm.
on your webpage. I think there's a portion where like you ask yourself questions, you kind of
Yeah.
give a kind of a description of it. And I don't remember the exact question, but one of them was something like that. Hey, does it, basically one shoe doesn't fit all, and you talk about how the way that you do things, and it may not necessarily be a fit for somebody, but it could be a fit for somebody else. And I think that that's probably an important part of counseling too. That just because you see somebody, and I know veterans and I know first responders personally, not just through the podcast, but I know some personally that have went to counseling for PTSD and years of trauma, and they did not click well for whatever reason with their therapist, their counselor, and that set the stage for every other therapist or counselor on planet Earth. That no, it was they were bullshit. They didn't know how to talk to me. They've never been there. They've never done that kind of thing. And I think that's an important message that you not just talked about, but it's also on your website. That hey, not one size fits all, right? There's different strokes for different folks. Every therapist kind of handles things a little bit different, and maybe your technique may not be good for somebody, but maybe for another veteran or for a police officer, you completely bond with. And not just knowing people personal, but on the podcast as well, I've had people come on and talk about how they've connected with their therapists because their therapist was a veteran, and they just felt more comfortable and they were able to be more vulnerable because at some point you've walked in those shoes, so it was easier for them to relate, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And there's this quote that really sticks out to me from one of the training I took. If, let's say we have a knife, right? And someone uses the knife to cut their food, prep food. The other goes around the mall and starts nipping people.
Right.
What's bad, right? Is the knife bad or is the person flawed? The person, right? Therapy is a tool. And so we're all humans utilizing a tool that we're learning about, that we're continuously growing with and hopefully evolving, because it's always changing. And that's why I like checking in with my folks, like, hey, how's it fitting with me, right? Are we vibing? Are we talking the same language? Do you feel like you're progressing?
Right.
Because if it's not with me, someone else can, right? They might be able to utilize this tool better than I can. And to me, I want you to find the right fit, because that's what I want for people, is to feel better at the end of the day, to better understand themselves and feel the healing that I felt that drove me to be in this profession.
Sure, absolutely. Kind of want to move into a little bit of what you do now, and maybe talk about some of the techniques, maybe some coping mechanisms and stuff. Now, one of the words that you used on your website that I really took keen to is you said healing and compassion. So I saw that is how you kind of manage your clients. What does healing and compassion look like in your practice, especially for veterans who oftentimes don't feel safe to be vulnerable? Veterans and first responders don't feel safe to be vulnerable because of our backgrounds. Like, what does healing and compassion look like? How do you bring that into play?
Yeah, growing with compassion. I think first responders and veterans, and not just us, right? But a lot of people learn to use negative self-talk as a motivator. And that could look like beating yourself up, like do better, or, just be more, just that voice in your head to make you strive for better. But there's a way to navigate life where we're kind to ourselves and we're still doing the things that we're working towards, right? Because our anxiety is a sign.
Yeah.
Or these thoughts, negative self-talk, they're giving us a sign that we want better for ourselves in this moment. But it doesn't need to sound so defeating, because what does that actually do more often than not? Just keep you stuck, right? You're more stuck because you're shaming yourself for not doing the things that you're wanting to do. But when you approach that with more kindness towards yourself, you can kind of let go some of the weight, because and it's easier said than done, because we learn this through our upbringing, right, and then our environments. And so the biggest thing with veterans, like from my point of view, and first responders as well, I've seen a lot of firefighters, is building safety first. You got to feel safe with me. You got to feel it out with me first. We're not going to go into big trauma work or your history until you feel safe enough and comfortable enough. And sometimes it's 2 sessions, sometimes it's longer. And I think the biggest struggle the theme that I see is like over identifying with specific chapters of our lives, right? We were trained to navigate the military or being a first responder in a very specific way.
Sure.
But that doesn't identify us as a whole person, right? And sometimes it's hard to let go of this identity, because not letting go, but to kind of unlearn some of the tendencies we used to do in service because we succeeded in it.
Sure.
But who were we before the military, right? Before all these things happened? Who were we before all the trauma that happened in our upbringing? We're not born to think that we're not good enough, or that that we should be ashamed of ourselves. All these negative things that we think about ourselves, right?
Right.
And that's the true growth, is like tapping into who are you now? Who do you want to be? Rather than really identifying with one chapter of our life. But it's work. It's hard work. It doesn't take a few sessions.
Why do veterans first? Why do they keep beating themselves up? Like why can't they get past that? Why do you think it is they keep doing that? And I'm also guilty of it too.
Mm-hmm. It's very layered. It depends on how you were disciplined growing up, right? If it was, hey, do better, and there was not a lot of like positive reinforcement, that could play a role. But in the military, for sure, is you had to be perfect. I mean, when you're in combat, you can't mess up. You have to be hyper attentive, right?
Yeah.
But that carries through civilian life, where the risks aren't that great. It's not our lives on the line anymore. It's not our battle buddies or other, I don't know the lingo that y'all use in the Marines or Army, right? But it's not your shipmate's life on the line anymore. It's just you. And so it doesn't need to sound that intense to get to where you want to be, right? But that takes intentional work. But that's just a few cases. It's very case by case. I don't want to generalize like this is what it is, right? But it takes a lot of just uncovering.
I always thought, at least in my particular case, and maybe some of my brothers that I've served with too, is it was like I always use the analogy like the high school quarterback days, and I was never a high school quarterback. Let me just say that. But those were like the best years of our lives, right? When I was in the military, I could never be a man like I was when I was in the service because of what we did. I could never amount to myself. I could never be that much of a person, because of my tours and the discipline that I had and the regimented lifestyle that I had. And I think people always play catch up to that, right? And they always try to relive the best days of their life. And I did that for a long time. Nothing ever compared to the military, right? There was even times when I completely missed birthdays. I didn't want to celebrate birthdays with my family because my brothers are still over there, and I shouldn't be here celebrating. Do you see that a lot in clients?
Yeah, and I think that that's also another moment where it's kind of redefining what your values are now.
Absolutely.
Right, because even transitioning out of the military, you're not only adapting to civilian life and the lingo that we
Mhm.
speak now, right, and the
Right.
pace of life, but people struggle with adapting to their family, like redefining their roles, because they come in, they do 10, 15, 20 years, even 4 years, right, and you're still acting like a sergeant or a master sergeant to your family, and it's like
Right.
this isn't that anymore. And so really taking the time to redefine goals and values and um, what that looks like for you now and what it
Right.
looked, and you're grieving that part of the military, right? Because you
Of
did
course.
so well, you succeeded, so you felt so alive and um, the best of your ability in the military, so you're grieving that part of your life. But it
Right.
takes work to do that process to better understand, like, who am I now, and
Yeah.
how can I accept me for me now rather than chasing who I used to be, because then the goalpost keeps extending. It's never going to be good enough because, like you said, that was peak.
Right.
But how do we redefine peak with our life now, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, Go ahead, Ryan.
Hey, Jason, just hearing you talk about healing with compassion and your techniques reminds me of when Jaime and I encountered therapy. And one of our brother officers on the SWAT team, Sean Diamond, was murdered. He was murdered in 2014, killed during a warrant. And at the time, I had 15 years on the team, and it was one of the 2 warrants I missed, so I wasn't there, but I was still included in group therapy. And we all gathered at the SWAT office, 18 gruff, hardened SWAT operators who had just went through this traumatic incident. And here's 2 female therapists who work for Counseling Team International who are awesome. But just to see the walls that immediately went up from the SWAT team. And God bless these girls, but they kept at it and kept at it and kept at it. And like you said, they didn't immediately bring up that trauma. But with compassion and some techniques that you mentioned, they eventually kind of chipped away at the guys. Towards the end of the session, of course, in session 1, no one's going to, try and bring all their feelings out to the forefront. But when we heard several of the guys, the most hardened guys, they told us later they actually reached out separately to Counseling Team International, and they went on to have several sessions that they volunteered for, which helped them immensely. So I could definitely understand what you're saying as far as techniques and sympathy, how far it goes in breaking down those walls.
It takes time, and like you said,
Yeah.
it doesn't happen in 1, 2 sessions, right? And I love that they provided that group therapy for y'all, because we're all humans, right? We're gonna feel the impact of that loss of your brother, but we don't know how to say it through words because of what we've learned throughout
Yeah.
our life. Withhold it, tough it in that out, right? So probably that first session was like, no, we're good. Yeah, we miss him, but it is what it is. But it's like, what's underneath though? And that's okay to be said out loud too, because others might be experiencing the same thing.
Yeah. And one thing I found is a big thing that hit our team was all the what ifs, right? What if this? What if that? Like there was trauma from people that were at the front door, at the front porch that day, like Jaime, right? All the way down to me, who was on a fishing boat unfortunately, when that warrant happened. But usually, I was right next to Jaime on the entry team, and my what ifs were like, well, what if I was there and my foot placement would have been 3 feet over, and it would have pushed Diamond's feet over, and that round would have missed him. So that's just different trauma, and like you said, so many levels that people on that team went through, which some of it has been greatly improved, but obviously some guys are dealing with it.
Yeah, the what ifs is what
Yeah.
gets us for sure. And I hear you.
Do
Yeah.
we do that to rationalize? Is that a way for us to like rationalize it in our head?
Rationalize, and also So there's stages of grief. And so one of the stages is like denial, right? And that's where what if I did this better? Or what if I showed up to work, right? And what if I was on the entry team? Those kind of thinking is part of the denial stage. You're still bargaining for that life that you're grieving. But it's something that we just all go through at one point. But to rationalize, but it's just part of the process of losing someone, because we want to be better. It's a sign that you want to be better at the end of the day. But finding that balance to not overwhelm yourself or just consume yourself in the what ifs, because where do we go?
Right.
Nowhere, right? We get stuck, and it doesn't feel good to be stuck in the what ifs.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you employ this in your therapy or not, or your counseling with your clients, but can you talk about, and maybe whether it's positive or negative, but what role do you believe that narrative therapy or storytelling plays in helping vets and first responders with trauma to help process their experiences and emotions? Like, what role do you believe that plays, if it plays any at all?
So talking out loud is actually one of the most healing part of therapy and your relationship with your therapist. Because if you don't feel safe with your therapist, or you still have your walls up, you can't go deep, right? And so you're not going to get much work out of that. But there's a part of our brain that, I don't want to get into like the hippocampus. No one's that's not gonna stick, but there's a part of our brain that's meant to just think. And there's another part of our brain where we say things out loud. It interrupts that part of the brain. And that's why narrative and retelling the story in a different way can help interrupt. Sometimes we get stuck in that thinking, right? And that's why we feel so anxious, overwhelmed, because that part of our brain is just on overdrive. And that's why trauma is so important to talk about, because it doesn't discriminate, right? We're humans at the end of the day, and we all get impacted by trauma equally. And so, it's a physiological thing that interrupts with storytelling and narrative style of therapy.
I'm glad that you said that, because I think it validates what we do on this podcast. Because I'm not an LPCC. I don't have any type of degree or anything that certifies me in therapy. But the reason I asked you that question specifically is because I kind of wanted that answer, was I figured you were going to give, is that's what we do on here. We feel like we create a space that we hope is safe for vets and first responders to come on here, and some have told their stories that they have never told anybody before. And the fact that they come on here and they tell us, I'm so grateful, because honestly, I'm nobody special. I'm nobody for somebody to come on here and tell me like their deepest secrets that they have. And sometimes it's been super emotional. So, to hear someone like yourself that has, that's a licensed in counseling and therapy to say, hey, that, a narrative therapy or storytelling does have its purpose in therapy, and that is healthy and therapeutic. It justifies, I think, what we do as a podcast, that people come on here, because, like I said, I wish I had a background like you did in therapy, but I don't. I just have experiences, and I have mistakes, and I have stories from other people like yourself that come on here and kind of share. And I think I just added to my repertoire, I guess, my toolbox, and I kind of use that. A lot of the stuff that you're saying here, it goes in my toolbox. And with our next guest, we'll use those type of things, going forward. So, I'm really glad that you said that about, like, storytelling, narrative therapy and how powerful that is.
For sure. And I wouldn't downplay y'all's ability to allow that for people, right? To make people feel safe enough to tell their stories. Because
Right.
y'all do that for people. And so that's a skill in itself. So y'all are doing amazing work, man. I was watching a few episodes, and for people to really open up in here, that's good to see. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I really want to ask you is people always have a misconception about therapy. That, well, a lot of it's that it doesn't help. That if you have therapy, it's just you're whacked. Therapy doesn't really help you. What's one misconception about therapy that you wish more people understood, especially for vets and first responders?
Being in therapy doesn't mean you're broken, right? It's it's still a huge stigma on mental health in general. It's still newly being kind of destigmatized. And so it makes sense why people have a lot of hesitancy to be in therapy, because before it was labeled as that's for crazy people. Right. But it's the same thing as going to your PCP. You go to a professional to really seek out like what's going on with your body that you can't see. Same thing with mental health, right? There's a lot of patterns that we've learned throughout our lives that once has helped us. So what I mean by that is even the military, right? You learn to be anxious, you learn to strive for perfection. And that allowed you to survive deployments, and now you're in the civilian world and you're still working on overdrive. Well, that skill is no longer helping you in this part of your life, and it's about finding balance.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest misconception of therapy, is that if you're in therapy, you're weak. You can't tough it out yourself. Well, how can you learn about the way to navigate your emotions and your thought process when you've never learned this from your parents, through high school, through college, right? Unless you meet with a professional like a therapist. Because we're just allowing you to tell your story.
Right.
We're really guiding you to tell us what you want to work on.
Right.
Because I don't have an agenda for you when you come to therapy. I want you to tell me what you want to work on. So
Jaime,
yeah.
you've mentioned you've been to therapy before, right?
Yeah, I actually still see a therapist every couple of weeks. Yeah, just to make sure I'm still.
So I'm just curious. I mean, you're like a really tough guy. Like you've been through a lot of traumatic incidents, shootings. I picture you as a atypical tough guy that puts up that wall, and you go from that now to hosting a wellness podcast. But I guess my question for you is, how long did it take for you to start opening up and accept that these therapists were really trying to help you? I'm sure it wasn't the first session.
Oh wow, what a good question. Actually, it took a long time, I think, to like chip away at, and God bless, my therapist. She was willing to do that, kind of just keep chipping away at it, and be able to, like Jason was saying, is kind of create that safe space where I'm like, okay, I could talk to I could talk to my therapist, and to be frank and honest, my therapist isn't a combat veteran, so I can from my own experiences, I can tell you that just because your therapist didn't serve in Iraq, it doesn't mean that they can't relate with you on on certain level. Yeah, and I think once she kept, once I took the concerted effort, I think the big thing is, Ryan, at the end of the day, is, in a nutshell, is you got to want it to, you got to want to heal, because, Jason, we can force cops to go to therapy all day, right? I can force them to go see you once a week, every week, until there's improvement somewhere. But the fact of the matter is, I think a part of it, there has to be some part of the vet or first responder or the client that wants to change. Because if you don't want to change, then everything you tell me is just fluff, right? It's going one ear and out the other. And I think I reached a point, to answer your question, Ryan, where, I wanted to change a little bit. I wanted to be different. I didn't always want to be, the A-type. It's funny how you described that, the A-type personality. You should take that as a compliment. But now I'm like, I still want to be A-type, but I also want to be an A-type approachable. I don't know if, if that is that such a thing, but I want to be the A-type approachable where, I can handle something if it comes up. I can handle a critical incident. I can stay calm. I can stay cool. I can stay collective. But also, if you want to come in here and talk to me about your issues, that I'm going to sit down with you and I'll be vulnerable with you and I'll talk to you about stuff. And honestly, that's the type of leader that I want to be. And I hope that cops see me that way. I hope that my peers see me that way. And I hope that my friends in my personal life see me that way. Like, hey, he's a good dude. He could be a hard dude when it's time to be hard. But, he can also be the dude that you sit down and have a deep conversation with. And he'll give you legitimate advice and not just be like, hey, no, we can't talk about that. You're weak or you're, whatever. I don't want to talk about your mental problems. And I used to be like that. I used to think that it was weakness. Seeing therapy was weakness. I used to view it that way. And a lot of it had to do, which is I'm going to segue into my next question, is cultural norms. You're a great example because you're from an immigrant Filipino. What role does cultural norms, and they're dangerous sometimes. A lot of them are good, but some of them are dangerous. What role traditionally, does cultural norms play in sometimes individuals seeking therapy or not?
A lot.
Yeah.
And that's one of the approaches that I like to not break down, but like be curious about the walls, right?
Sure.
To normalize that these walls do exist because of what you've learned through culture.
Yeah.
Because even there's a power dynamic with a therapist and a client. As much as we want it to be neutral, there's still that subconscious thought that this person is the licensed person.
Sure.
And think about the Filipino culture, power dynamics exist.
Right.
And then that gets exemplified through the military, right? Now you're COC, chain of command. And sometimes people struggle to be vulnerable because vulnerability wasn't a part of my culture. You got to figure it out, man. Like, go be independent, go navigate high school, all those things by yourself, all those things. But it's definitely person by person and culture by culture, but subcultures as well. Because your friend groups in high school is a subculture, the military is a culture, right? So it's a lot of layers that can influence that hesitancy and that openness. So it's a huge factor.
Yeah, and I think just growing up, my folks are a lot different now in their later years than they were growing up in this podcast because I listen to every podcast. But they would also agree to this that if you would have mentioned the word therapy to them, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, they would have laughed in your face. If anybody mentioned the word therapy to like my uncles growing up, or even my grandmother, she probably would have slapped you, or she would have gave you the fucking chancla or whatever, right? Because those terms didn't exist in old school Mexican cultures. To deal with your issues, you deal with it in private, and perceived as weakness to talk to somebody about it, or what we call being vulnerable. It was a weakness. Years later, come to find out that it's actually a strength to be able to have the fortitude and the power to be able to speak to somebody. about trauma and traumatic issues and anxiety and those type of things. Yeah, and I've said before, sometimes cultural norms can be very dangerous. There are very good cultural norms, the hard work and the good ethics and principles that I grew up with. But some cultural norms weren't so good, and they were a little detrimental to. They can be detrimental to mental health for sure. And like you said, I think if we recognize those and we learn to become our own people in our own spaces, then we can overcome some of those negative cultural norms. And speaking of like therapy and stuff and all your clients, Jason, I'm always curious. What emotional truths did you uncover about yourself during your own therapy journey, or as you provide therapy to your clients? Was there ever a point where you're like, you realized truths about yourself?
Oh, for sure. I'm a softie at heart. Like I present always good on the outside, but I'm an empath at the end of the day, right? Like I put myself in people's shoes all the time, and my clients teach me a lot about life. And when we tell them, like, we learn a lot through you, and it's true because every perspective is unique. But one thing that really stood out to me through my work is how much I was grieving different relationships in my life that are still even around, but they've changed as people.
Right.
And through my work, that allows me to really reflect and grieve it properly and not just push it under the rug. And what I mean by grieve it properly, right? Like think about the memories you've had with that person and the impact that they've had, and what does goodbye look like to the version that you once loved about these people, right? So to me, I think that's the biggest lesson that I've learned is I still require work, even as a therapist, right? We use the skills. I hope that we use the skills that we're guiding our clients to use because they're important. Like I still tell myself, hey man, you're overthinking.
Right.
Get out of them. Like, what are you thinking right now? What does it mean? How do you want to respond to this? And we're always ongoing work. We're always growing as people. We're always changing. And yeah.
I hope people, if there's someone out there that needs therapy and they're looking for a therapist, I hope that when we air this episode that they hear that, because I have learned in the past few years, from people like Ryan and now people like yourself, that true leadership, it isn't about knowing everything. As a counselor, the fact that you just said, look, I'm also still learning, right? Like life is this journey. I don't have counseling at 100%. I didn't write the book. You didn't write the DSM-5 or whatever, right? That you're still, like, you're evolving. And to me, that's the type of therapist that I would want, right? I frequently tell people, even at work, I said, I don't know the answer to that. But I can look it up and try to find it for you. I don't know the answer. And it's not an insecurity. I pride myself in saying that to people because I try not to be this person that people think like the know-it-all or, this perfect individual. Like, no, that's not me. I don't know everything. I know enough, but I don't know everything. And the fact that you as a therapist, you still evolve and your clients teach you stuff and you help your clients. I think that's the best type of therapy, if you ask me. I love that. With that being said, is there a time, any time in any of your sessions that you can share when a client's breakthrough, and you don't have to be specific because I know there's ethical, laws and that type of stuff, but was there ever a time that you saw a client breakthrough that shifted your own perspective as a therapist that you can think of?
A combat vet. Um, he actually graduated from therapy, but the last session we had, they went from not wanting to live, right, and causing chaos in family to having so much optimism. And in that moment, like going through so many tours and still being able to stand in front of me and say, I'm ready to go. Like that was that solidified my belief that therapy does work if you really want it. Because it wasn't just the combat that they struggled with, right? It was all the things before the military with family and all those things. Yeah, and it was the first few times where I had chills, when graduating someone and they're reflecting on their growth, and we hugged it out, man. Like it was awesome. It was such a big breakthrough.
What's your approach when? And I mean, I'm sure you've had to have had it at some point where you're talking with a client and they say, I don't want to talk about this. What's your approach to that? How do you handle that when, or if a client has said that?
Let's table it, right? Because I don't want to force you to uncover something that may be too overwhelming, especially if you don't have enough time in session to fully process it. Because I think about aftercare, right? Like if we uncover this and then you find yourself just thinking about this over and over again, now I've made you worse throughout your week. And that's what I do. But to navigate it, if it's impacting them, well, let's weigh out the pros and cons, right? What would happen if we did talk about this? So that kind of allows them to think about what they're fearing of. Well, you might judge me, or it could be a whole story that they might be thinking in their head. And so just leaning with curiosity at the end of the day to tap into it if they want. If they truly don't want to, then let's not talk about it. But how does it impact you by not uncovering it? If it doesn't, then let's keep it covered.
Nice. I like that. Patience. What's the most powerful feedback you've ever received from a client that you can recall? Or is there a place for them to give you feedback?
Oh, absolutely. I always ask for feedback. Like you said, I don't take it as a job. I love growing as a professional, as a person. So at the end of our time together, I let them tell me like what they think. But I think the way I listen, and the way I truly care for them, and the way I remember their whole story. Because that's the thing about me. Like I remember each client's history. Like I'm gonna remember your wife's name, your dog's name, the trauma you've experienced throughout your life, and that allows people to really feel heard and understood. And I think that's the most powerful. Like I love that about my work, and also how it impacts the people that I work with, because it's a consistent feedback that I get.
Yeah, and I would imagine that takes a lot of like active listening, right? Being present and not just hearing as a therapist, clock in at 6 o'clock and hey, we're at 6:59. We got 1 minute. Let's wrap it up and see you next week or whatever. A lot of active listening. Yeah, I love that. Again, I listen to you and a lot of things you're saying. I take to heed and hope to practice. Here on the podcast, because I think what we do is, in a sense, is a little bit of therapy. Not obviously on the level that you do it, but I think what we do is a little bit of therapy. If anything, it's therapy for me, at very minimum. So you in again, snooping through your website, you say that therapy is like dating. How do you know when you've connected with a client, like when the therapeutic relationship, I guess, is truly working?
So I have this method of checking in every 2 to 3 sessions when we first start.
Okay.
Hey, how's it go? How was this session for you? How's it been working with me? And that's when we feel out like, well, you're not doing this the way I want.
Right.
But when you truly know, is they're just kind of in the zone. They're just open. They're vulnerable. They're taking in what you're saying. Yeah, but date your therapist. Not every person's gonna be the right fit. So give them feedback. Giving your therapist feedback is one of the most powerful thing, by the way. Like if there is something that you don't like about them, it might be a history that is coming up for you, right? Like the power dynamic. You remind me of X, Y, and Z, and that's why I have this block. Well, let's talk about that, right?
Right.
So there's a whole story behind each blocks that we may experience with our therapist, or it could be a skill issue or a personality. But give feedback. I highly suggest people to give feedback, even though that's not easy as well. Right? Cultural things, respect your elders. That can be a role.
Jason, hearing a lot of trauma in your sessions, how do you deal with that emotionally? How do you not allow that to become self-absorbed by others' emotions? Like, what does your coping mechanisms look like?
Oof, I have a lot. One, I like to practice empathy in session, but I also have learned to turn off my therapy brain when I clock out.
That's good.
I wish well for you, but when I was a new therapist, I used to always think about my clients, like what interventions do I use? How do I navigate the next session? Now I'm like, I hope the best for you, but you're gonna be okay, right? And I believe that with each of my clients. For me, my coping strategies is being intentional about my time with my wife, my dog, family, engaging in my hobbies, video games, singing, dancing, going outside for walks, physical activity. There's Cosmo. He's a national racer, by the way. He's
Is it
fast.
really?
The corgi.
And
Yeah.
I also want our followers to know that if you're interested in maybe seeking counseling from Jason, also know that Jason does not do his sessions alone. That Cosmo is in his sessions. Yes, I saw your Instagram video with that.
Yes,
So
he is.
you won't be alone, but just know that Jason will be accompanied by his partner Cosmo there.
And he can pop up if you need him. He's an emotional
like that.
support.
I like that. So you talked about some coping mechanisms and stuff. What does joy look like for you today, and how do you help your clients rediscover theirs?
Live life first for them. I have this cup, self-love over acceptance. And what I mean by that is when we really navigate life with focusing on our self first, we surround ourselves with the people that we need around us, right? Because those are the people that accept you for who you truly are.
Sure.
Because sometimes playing the role that people have influenced you to be can feel overwhelming and exhausting. So to me, that's what joy looks like to me now, is being me, right? And if people don't like me for me, then maybe that's not the person that I want to be around with. But the people that I'm around with now fills my cup. They provide a positive purpose in my life, and that's what it's about.
What's one emotion in your life that you had to make peace with?
One emotion?
Yeah. Like for instance, for me, it's patience. Like it's a new, I'm embarrassed, but it's a new thing in my life to have patience with everybody, personally, professionally. I think I wanted things, ASAP, and I would say that I did see something on your website that did help me out, and it said, I want to pull it up, high expectations of others. The military culture instills precision and discipline, which can lead to frustration when civilians don't operate at the same urgency. I have operated off of that for a very long time. And to read that, it's like, look, I have to have different expectations, right? We're not going to combat. We're not war. We're not at 0530 formation. So I've learned a lot of patience. But what's, is there emotion in your life that you've came to peace with?
Patience as well. I think that's what allowed me to excel in the Navy, right? Because I was go. I was everywhere. And transitioning out, I always wanted people to move the same pace that I moved. And if they didn't, I would get frustrated or irritable.
Right.
But now I've learned to accept people to move at their own pace. And I navigate life the way I need to, but people don't need to navigate life the way I do, because that causes frustration. It's a form of control, right? You want people to change, to adapt to what you think is right. But it's like, that's their life. That is right for them.
Okay. I love that. Jason, as we start to kind of wrap it up, I want to give you the floor here. I always like to ask this question. Is there any advice that you could give first responders? Is there any advice that you can give the veteran community that, may be going through something? What advice would you give them?
One is you're not alone.
Such a loaded question, but
yeah, it's there's a lot of words, but you're not alone. Nor are you weak for experiencing the things you're struggling with now. We're made from the same cloth. We're all humans. We experience emotions like the next person. And so for you to be experiencing struggles and difficulty with whatever you're experiencing, it's okay. That's what makes you human, right? We're not AI. We're not designed to navigate life in one way, especially not being open about your struggles, because that's what keeps us stuck. So you're not alone, and you're not defective for feeling the way you do. It's okay. It's okay to be struggling. It's okay to not be okay. I know it sounds cliche, but I've seen all walks of life be vulnerable, and it's a part of our being as humans. So.
Yeah, I love that, man. Ryan, any closing words? Anything for Jason?
Yeah, great podcast, man. Some of the things that resonate with me is, your whole thing is based on compassion, and you talked about compassion is something that we don't just give to others like you do. It's something that we have to open up ourselves to receive. All those tough guy in military or cops like us that put up those walls, we have to be willing to accept that compassion in order for it to work. And like Jaime said, you want to be willing to change. Also is like, it's not going to happen overnight. It's something that you, Jason, and people in your field very expertly chip away at. And if the person receiving that therapy realizes that it's not an overnight thing, then they're more bound to stay in it for the long haul and get, true results. And you've also come across and told us that you're a lifelong learner, which is great. You're the type, like I've said, the type of therapist I'd want to have, someone that's continually learning, trying to improve. And I love the analogy that Jaime uses. At his job, he's the first to say, I don't know, let me find the answer. I can tell you for a fact, when I was a patrolman many moons ago, the worst thing was to have a brand new sergeant show up on scene and try to pretend that they knew way more than they didn't. And that is the number one way to lose a respect to the troops, right? It's that supervisor that shows up and says, I don't know. What do you think? How can we make this better? What do you recommend? Those are the supervisors. Those are the leaders that are truly going to make an impact to the young people. So anyway, very enlightening for me. I'm glad there's people like you in your profession, military and Law enforcement, thank you, and thank you for being on the podcast.
For having me, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Yeah, well said, Ryan. Kind of took a lot of the words out of my mouth. I always write down like little notes as we go through the podcast, Jason, of little things that like stick out about somebody. And two of the things that you said that really stuck out. You talked about empathy, and you talked about compassion, and basically that's how you operate, right? You operate off of empathy, and you operate off of compassion. I echo what Ryan said. It's grateful. I'm grateful that there's therapists like you out there. That it also, from academia, you have an academic background, and you learn a lot of this stuff from listening to somebody. But not just that, but you've also experienced some of it in your life, right? Being an immigrant and coming over here to a whole new country, and starting all over. That's a lot. And then joining the military and experiencing a gambit of emotions, depression, being on ship and on the submarine, and then realizing that your calling wasn't therapy, and because you were an advocate, and you wanted to help other people. That's really powerful, and to know that there's people like you out there. It's great to know, and stuff that you've said here today. You really left a mark on the podcast, especially on me, because a lot of the stuff that you said, I take little notes on here to help me out going forward, and to hopefully use those tools and techniques to help other people, because that's the mission. And a lot of what you did today really helped me out, and probably helped out Ryan in some sense. And that doesn't even include the followers, the people that that it may help out once we put this episode out. Thanks a lot, Jason. I'm grateful that someone like yourself came on here. It's really the first time we've had an LPC and give such a powerful insight to everything. And also, are you currently taking new clients, Jason, or?
I am limited, but
okay.
Yeah.
Limited. So for anybody that's following, if you'd like to reach out to him and potentially see if you could be a client for him, it's Astorga Counseling. That's Astorga, ASTORGA counseling.com, or it's Jason at astorgacounseling.com. You can reach out to him via email and chop it up, and take it from there, see where it goes from there. But once again, Jason, as we close up, I want to thank you for your very impactful, very powerful words. We're very grateful for it, and we really appreciate having you on this podcast.
Thank you to both of you for having me, welcoming me. And I'm just going to reiterate what I said earlier. Y'all have the skill to make people feel safe and be vulnerable on here. And I don't want y'all to downplay that, right? Just because you don't have the LPCC, it doesn't mean that you don't have the human skill that you both have. That's natural, and you can't teach that. So I appreciate y'all. I love what y'all do, and I'm rooting for y'all. And if y'all ever need anything, just reach out. I'm an open book, man. Get my line.
Appreciate it.
It means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah.
A phone call away.
Thank you so much. So as we close up here, please remember, every story shared on Whiskey and War Stories is a reminder that strength isn't just about surviving. It's about speaking up, breaking the silence, and finding connection to the chaos. If you felt the weight of your own stories, know this. Like Jason said, you're not alone. There's power in vulnerability, and healing starts with conversations. Thanks for listening. Again, if this episode moved you, share it. And don't forget to follow and subscribe. Again, we're on Instagram, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, because these stories really deserve to be heard. Stay safe, stay grounded, and keep telling your story. We'll be here. Whiskey in hand, ready to listen. Thank you. Cheers, boys.
Good night.
Good night.
Have a good night.